room was a disaster this morning. I was moving furniture and I was crazy. I think they're done because they put some things back, like my filing cabinets, but they didn't put back other things. So this morning's been crazy, so I'm worried about my cords. I'm going to do a test recording here. Okay, so what we did on Friday was the graph of sine. Now we're doing the graph of cosine. And it is every single thing we learned on Friday is identical to what I'm going to do with you today, except the pattern of the points. So if you guys remember, the pattern for sine was middle, up, middle, down, middle. You have to memorize that. You have to know the pattern for sine. And today you're going to learn cosine's pattern, which is up, middle, down, middle, up. But we'll get to that. Okay, so I'm just going to fill this in with you guys so you can just see where the points come from. Again, just like on Friday, we learned that the x-axis is a bunch of thetas right off the unit circle, okay? The quadrantals are there, 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi, and then a sprinkling of other ones in the different quadrants, okay? So at x is 0, when our theta is 0, like this is 0 pi is what that means, we have a cosine value of 1. At pi over 6, we have a cosine value of square root of 3 over 2. Okay, cosine. At pi over 3, cosine is 1/2, and so on. So that's where these numbers are coming from. I'm just going to fill them in real quick. You fill them in real quick. Now, if you remember from Friday, you do not have to memorize these. Like, you have them memorized as far as, like, the unit circle goes, but you never have to, like, really come up with these points again. The only reason we're talking about them is to kind of give you an idea of where it comes from, okay, the graph comes from. It starts with these points, and then we start changing the period so it stretches it horizontally or shrinks it horizontally, and that can change those x values. But the pattern will be the same, okay? And we also talked about on Friday that we don't graph every single point. We pick 5 key points out of all of these, and we graph those. And the ones in between our key points are like decimals, fractions, so that they're harder to graph. But they're on the graph. They're in between all the other points. So there's a clear, there's 5 clear, oops, sorry, nope, not that one, this one. 5 clear winners. Looking at the y values, think about what you want to have to graph when you graph these. It's so much easier to graph 1, -1, 0, than -1, 10, 8, 7, and things like that. So we use these 5 key points to graph the graph of cosine. Okay? I'm not going to go through all that again, but let's look at the top of the next page. Yes, top of the next page, and see that graph. So the 5 key points are there. There's that 0, 1, and so on. There's a middle point. It's an x-intercept, pi over 2, 0. That's this point, and so on. There's a minimum, another x-intercept, and then that other max. That is the graph of sine. So we identified the actual ordered pairs on the other side, but what I want you guys to notice as I read those, you have a maximum, right? That's a max. Then you have an intercept. Then you have a min. Then you have another intercept. And then a matching max, right? You have 2 maxes. They're always at the same amplitude. But as I told you guys on Friday, I don't like to use these words. I prefer saying up and down and middle because it's just, when these start moving around, it makes more sense. So we can call this up, middle, down, right? Up, middle, down. Then what comes next? Middle, and then what? Up. This is what you have to remember for cosine. Up, middle, down, middle, up. It makes kind of like a U or a V, but it's curvy. Notice it's not straight lines connecting the points. It's curvy. And that just repeats on and on and on and on. Okay? So The domain is from negative infinity to infinity. The amplitude is the absolute value of A. So amplitude is A. The key points we just talked about, those. The range of the parent function, negative 1 to 1, that's as high as, and low as we go until we start throwing new amplitudes in. And then here's that period stuff. Period equals 2 pi over b. That's when we want to find the period. Sometimes we want to find b. And I don't know. Oh, good Lord. Bless you. It scared me too. It's so funny. Doesn't everybody have different sneezes? Like, everyone has a unique sneeze. Okay, so listen. I don't know if it was this class or third period, but someone said to me, oh, so in those two formulas, 2 pi is always in the numerator. Was that this class? I don't know. Must not have been. But I didn't even notice it. I always learn from my students. 2 pi is always in the numerator. And you divide 2 pi by whatever it is you have. You either have the period or you have b. And I'll go over this with problems in the homework with you, of course. But these two formulas you have to know. But they're easy. You're trying to find the period or b. You just divide 2 pi, always on top, by whatever you have. You'll get the thing you don't have. Okay? And here's the parent function again. Remember, A is your amplitude. B affects the period. B and period are not the same thing. They're related. They're like cousins, right? But they're not the same thing. So let's do a problem not this easy. Let's jump right over to having one with an A and a B value. Okay? So example 10 is where I want to go. And remember, we know the parent function. We just graphed it or looked at the graph and talked about all the key points and everything. But then they're going to start throwing numbers and signs and all kinds of stuff. And by wherever a number and a symbol stand, whatever order they're in, tells us a lot about it, right? We know the number after the equal sign is our A value. We have an amplitude of 2, right, with a flip over the x-axis. We talked about this on Friday. Both the negative number and the 2, both of those affect the which value, the x or the y value? Y value, right. Okay, so we're going to be multiplying all of our y values by negative 2. That will stretch the graph vertically by 2. It will flip it over the x-axis, okay? The 1/2, that's your b value. So this is A, this is B. 1/2 is your b value. It affects the period. It changes how much of the graph. Understand this. The period is how much of the x-axis do we use to make 5 points, okay? How much of the x-axis do we use in the parent function? 2 pi. The period is 2 pi here, okay? But when they throw a b value at us, it's going to change it from 2 pi to something else. But what I want you to pull away from this right now is when we have a b value, it's going to change the period, like I said, which affects how long or skinny it is, horizontal change, I should say it like that, which affects the x value. So the rule here for these points, we're going to take these points. We said already we're going to multiply all the y values by negative 2. What are we going to multiply the x values by? What? Not 1/2. Remember, you have to remember. Lots of things we have to remember in math, right? All these rules. Why didn't they just put the 2 there? We're not going to worry about it. We just know we have to flip that. Always. So if that was a 2, it has to be 1/2. X is always difficult. Remember, we've talked about that. With x, when you have left or right, it's opposite sign, like minus is to the right. Just remember, x is always going to give us a hard time. It's special. It needs special attention. All right, so now we're just going to go through the xy chart and do a rule, okay? So we're going to multiply our x value by 2. Okay, 0 times 2 is still just 0. And we'll multiply our y value by negative 2. So 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Continuing on. Pi over 2 is our x value. We'll multiply it by 2. So pi over 2 times 2 over 1. Remember, with multiplication, we don't need a common denominator. So we just multiply straight across. But let's just simplify it first. So that's just pi. Multiply 0 by negative 2, stays 0. Pi times 2, 2 pi. Negative 1 times negative 2, 2. 3 pi over 2 times 2 over 1. 2's cancel, left with just 3 pi. 0 times anything is 0. And last one, 2 pi times 2 is 4 pi. And 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Look at your x values. They should always be equally spaced. And they are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 pi. Okay? So that's what always will happen with your x's. So you should know something's wrong if they are not equally spaced. Okay, let's graph it. So it is a flip. So instead of having, so the mantra is up, middle, down, middle, up. That's the parent function, but we're flipping it. So our ups become downs and our down becomes an up. Mids don't change. Mids won't change. Okay, so I'm going to put my two ups, which are now downs, at, we're going to go up and down too. So I'm going to be here, and where is 4 pi? Way over here, I would have another down. Right in the middle, I have my up, and then you have your x-intercepts between those two. And then make it as curvy as you can. I'm not going to grade you on your curve, but it should not be a V. Do not make it like an X. So I'm going to do it in red how you shouldn't do it. Don't do this. Okay? Don't make a V. Try to put some curve in there. Just don't make it a V. Okay, we're going to jump to the homework here in a second. I want to go over the rule for this graph. Okay, so we already said 3 is our stretch or shrink. That's going to affect the y value. What is this minus 2 going to do to all of our points? Down 2. What does that affect, x or y? Y. So 3 times y minus 2 is what you would do for that one, which we don't need to do it. You know how to multiply and subtract. But just to talk about it. Okay? So let's go to the homework. And I'm going to do 1 through 9 with you, leave 10, 11, 12 for you to finish, and then you'll even have time left over, I'm sure, unless something happens. Okay, so Hakeem, you are learning Friday's lesson here. The only difference is this. Everything I'm doing with you guys is exactly the same. The homework is exactly the same. The only difference is the pattern of the points, okay? So what we're going to do in 1 through 4 is find the amplitude, and well, we're going to write the equation. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to write the equation, which if you need to write it, looks like this. What? Oh, sorry. C16. C16, 1 through 12. Sorry about that. I forgot to do that last year. Okay, so to write the equation of sine or cosine, we need a and b. So we have to figure out what a is and what b is. Okay? So a is the easier one, right? We go up to 2, we go down to negative 2, amplitude is 2. Then you want to check for, is there a flip? Is there a flip here? The answer is what? Yeah. We start down on the x-axis. This is down, middle, up, middle, down. So our a value is going to end up being negative when we plug it in. Technically, the amplitude is just 2, right, with a flip. So if the question was, what's the amplitude, you would say 2. So maybe I shouldn't do that. I should just say flip, because I don't want to confuse you guys. It is a positive 2 with a flip, which when you put it in the equation is a negative 2. Okay. B, we're going to use our formula. We are going to divide 2 pi by whatever the period is. So 2 pi is always on top. So how do I figure that out? Well, I count points. Down, middle, up, middle, down. That is 5 points, 1 period or cycle. How far out did we go? 4 pi. That's it. Simplify, we get 1/2. We're now ready to write the equation. Y equals -2, because it's a flip, cosine, parentheses, 1/2 x. Again, we went from 0 to 4 pi was 1 period. Okay? Let's do another one. A and B is what we need to be able to plug in. Like slope-intercept form, you pull out the M and the B and you plug it in. Here we need these two values. Okay, so A would be, I need my key, I cannot see. A would be up to 3 down to -3. That makes our amplitude 3. Okay? Remember, if they're different numbers, you would use your formula, which is this. So if I do my max minus my min, that's absolutely fine. That's 3 minus -3, which ends up being 6. Half of 6 is 3. Okay, so that's how we're getting it, but we don't have to use the formula if these numbers are the same. Okay, and then B, we start, and there's no flip here, right? We start up. So up, middle, down, middle, up. 5 points makes 1 period. So we go from 0 to that pi. So to find B, we divide 2 pi by pi. The period, listen, the period of pi is not the B value. Period and B are not the same thing. They affect each other, but they're not the same. Okay, so our formula, our equation is 3 cosine parentheses 2x. B is 2, not pi. B is 2, not pi. Okay, let's look at this. I don't like it when she does a decimal, but let's just call it 2.5 and -2.5. So I'm going to have to make an estimate there. Is it a flip? Yeah, it's a flip, because we start down, right? And let's see how far out we go. Down, middle, up, middle, down. What is this number right here? 4 pi? I just can't see. 2 pi divided by. So 2 pi is always in the numerator, divided by how far out did we go with our 5 points? 4 pi. And then to simplify that, pi's cancel. 2/4 is 1/2. So because it's a flip, we'd have a -2.5 cosine 1/2 x. You getting this? Hopefully it feels easier than Friday, because we're doing it again. All right, A equals, B equals. Up to 4, down to -4, amplitude is 4. I'm starting up, middle down, so it's not a flip. And then I'm going to go out 5 places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one is really squeezed. Really, really squeezed. We go out to pi over 2. So to find B, 2 pi on top divided by whatever the period is. Know how to divide with fractions. It happens all the time in trig. So it's keep the numerator, change division to times, that's division, and flip your denominator, your bottom fraction. You would not have a calculator for that, yeah. Plus, if you put 2 pi divided by pi over 2 in your calculator, it's going to give you a decimal. I mean, you could, I guess, do the numbers and then deal with pi, but pi's will cancel in this case, and you're just left with 4. Okay? Ready to write our answer. Y equals, our amplitude is 4, times cosine of 4x. Same exact thing we did Friday. The only difference was it was sine. All the other stuff is exactly the same. okay? In this next one, they're giving us different information. They're giving us amplitude and they're giving us period. We don't have to read the graph to find period, but we have to be able to graph it and write the equation, okay? So remember, to write the equation, we need A and B. That hasn't changed. They gave us A. It's 3. Right? It's given to us. Amplitude is 3. The period is 2 pi. So to find B, I do 2 pi divided by the period, which is just 1. So the equation, 3 cosine 1x, I don't need to put it there. Okay? So there's no flip. My two ends are going to be ups. So at 3, 0, 3, and at 2 pi, 3, that's how far out we go, right? That's how far out we go. I have my ups, I have my down right in the middle, and then my 2 x-intercepts. And then make it as curvy as you can. That's what it is. It's a wave. It looks like this. That's what the actual graph looks like. So you have to make it like that. It's not like these. Okay? Because your first point is always at 0. Well, we're spacing it equally. So we're out for sure. Endpoints are at 0 and 2 pi. And then breaking it up equally in between. In the middle of 2 pi and 0 is pi, and so on. Okay? All right, let's do another one. We need A. We need B. A is given to us, right? That's the amplitude. B is 2 pi divided by the period, which is just 2. Equation. Okay, so we are going to go out to pi. That tells us where our final point is. At 0, we have a max or an up at 2. And at pi, we have an up or max. Okay, because that's how far. That's all we're going to use. How much of the x-axis we use to make 5 points, that's your period. So in between 0 and pi is half of pi, right? Pi over 2. That would be that at the bottom. And then in the middle of those, we have our x-intercepts. The closer it is together, the harder it is to make it a curve. Do the best you can. And that's 1 period. Right? Again, B and period are not the same thing. Period is pi, B is 2. Make sure you're getting that. We need A, we need B. A is given to us. B is a little formula we memorized. 2 pi on top divided by what I have. Is 1. And when your B is 1, you don't really need to put a 1 in front of x. We all know that if there's no number in front of x, it's just 1. But the period is important for our graph. Even though it's not really in the equation, we know that we start at 1.5, so 0, 1.5, and then we go out to 2 and go up to 1.5. Those are our maxes. Right in the middle of 0 and 2 pi would be pi. There's a min. And then in between those are your x-intercepts. It looks like a V with your points, right? Everything should be equally spaced, always. And then we connect with a curve. Oh, I gotta change it to radians. I'll graph it for you so you can see what it looks like really nice. Okay, and let's keep going. Finish up 2 more together. A is 3. B is a formula. 2 pi divided by 4 pi. Pi's cancel. 2/4 is 1/2. All right, so 0, 3, 4 pi, 3, right? Those are my ends. In the middle of 0 and 4 pi would be 2 pi. 1, 3, there. And then we have x-intercepts in the middle. So between 0 and 2 pi would be 1 pi. Between 2 pi and 4 pi would be 3 pi. Equally spaced. That's important. All right, I'm just going to do one more with you. You don't need to do the rule. So here we have the equation given to us. We're going to find the amplitude in the period and then graph it. We have to set up the x-axis ourselves. So the amplitude is 4 with a flip, right? Because of the negative. Amplitude is always positive. Our period. So here's the difference, guys. Remember I told you the formula is really the same? What do we have in this case? We have B. What are we trying to find? The period. Oops, that's wrong. That's wrong. We're trying to find the period, sorry. So it's 2 pi divided by B. We have B. What is B? 1. Nope. It's the B value right here in front of X. It's 1. So B is 1 given to us. What's B in number 10? 1/2. B here would be 2. B here would be 2/3. So if you have the equation, you have B. The formula is the same. Always 2 pi on top, divide by what you have to find what you're trying to find. So period and B can switch places, same formula, right? So it's just 2 pi. 2 pi divided by 1 is 2 pi. What does that mean? That means I'm going to go from 0 to 2 pi to make 1 period. So we talked about this on Friday. The hardest thing is making your x-axis. So I always use even numbers. 2 or 4 is typically what I use. So my first point will be at 0. Then I'll have another point, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Because remember, your first point is on the x-axis. So I just counted by 2s. You could have counted by 4s. Could you count by 3s? Yes, but it makes the ones in the middle a little bit harder if you have to do it, okay? So this is 2 pi. Oh, I was looking at my key and I thought I did something wrong. And then in the middle would be pi. And that's good enough. Like, you don't have to label the whole x-axis, especially because most of these would be multiple choice questions. And so you would probably, I'm just thinking, guessing on a multiple choice test or whatever, you'd have like 4 different choices of a graph and have to pick which one matches the equation. So you would be looking at the amplitude. Was there a flip? What's the x-axis doing? Things like that. All right, so there is a flip, so we start down. Okay, we start down at 4. So instead of going up, middle, down, we're going to go down, middle, up, middle, and then down. So that's what you're doing for the last 3.